everyone, welcome to OCD Live. Let's get to some questions. So here I have a question. They're asking me, the person's asking me is, if they're in school and they have a topic that their OCD is on specifically, how do they handle that? And this question I get a lot about school and family bringing stuff up and work and activities. So when you are put in a situation where you know you will be triggered, as you know, as unlikely as it seems, this is actually a good thing. But it's only a good thing if you can handle yourself correctly. Because your brain, every time you're put in any situation, your brain is always learning how to handle it. And most of the time, we are subconsciously reacting the same way. So, for example, in the morning, you're used to having your coffee a certain way, and you're always just kind of on autopilot drinking your coffee a certain way. Or you go and usually have the same breakfast. And sometimes we change it. And when we're faced with that, for example, the morning ritual of eating something, you have a choice of what to do, but no matter what you do, your brain will learn. So your brain will learn, oh, okay, now you're like this better than that. Or you're choosing to pay attention to this over that. Same thing with OCD. That whenever you get a situation where you have to react to what scares you, to your OCD thought, it's an opportunity for you to change your mind or to make your OCD worse. But either way, your brain is going to get a signal and it's going to go one way or another. It's not going to stay exactly how it is. It's either going to learn that, yes, the situation is important and dangerous, please send me even more thoughts with even more anxiety, or this situation is less dangerous. So I'm explaining this just to illustrate to you the importance of when you are going into an exposure, which means you're exposed to what you fear, in this case, like a lesson being taught on a certain topic. When you are exposed, you have to make sure you are reacting correctly, because if you don't react correctly, you're going to make yourself worse. But if you do react correctly, this is a great opportunity for changing your mind, and exposures, as you know from my other videos, are a very important part in making OCD better, but you have to be ready to handle it. So a few days ahead where you know it's going to happen, because you were saying you were going to avoid it for now, and that's fine. I mean, avoidance is not the best, but you know, this is kind of an isolated incident, so it's not a continuous situation. And if you're not ready for it, you're not ready for it. You will be ready for it at some point. But it's like, you know how they say, you know, when you call, if you guys are from different countries, like not like from Canada or from the States, you know, when you go to play baseball and, you know, you're called to the plate, you better bring a bat. Like, Canadians and Americans know what I'm talking about, but other people might not. Basically, when you're going into war, you better bring a sword. Same kind of idea. You know, it's like, if you're not ready for it, maybe right now is not the time. But if you feel like at all that you might be able to push yourself through, it might be a good opportunity for like getting a little bit ahead on your OCD recovery. So speeding it up a little bit. You're already doing exposures all day long because you always have the thoughts coming into your mind. So there are exposures already happening, especially when you have an OCD that's more mental based rather than like physical based. You're already doing it, but if you're faced with something like this, it kind of propels you forward because your brain says, oh, okay, I see this person is seeing the situation, but they're not reacting. So it's a very good thing if you can handle it. So, okay, so next question I have is, when you get reassurance, and this is the question is about if you get reassurance about something and then you doubt what the person said. So if the person said, oh, this didn't happen, you worry that what if they said that it did happen instead, right? So starting to doubt what you've heard, and it's kind of like a false memory thing. So, and this is very common, and again, this is the thing with reassurance, is that it's very rarely enough. Sometimes the situation is just so plain obvious that, you know, it's just enough. And other times you still continue to worry. And that happens for most people because you're trying to outsmart yourself, you know, and that's impossible because you are just as smart as you. So no matter what, you, one, comes up with, you, two, will come up with a way to override that. So even if you get reassurance and the person says it didn't happen, your mind will think, well, what if they were saying it did and I didn't hear them right? So that's a very, very common thought. And I hear it all the time. You really have to push through now and say, I'm not going to look into it further, because the further you look into it, the more anxiety will go up, the less of the actual event you will remember, because it's all going to get jumbled in your head because you're so anxious and you're not really even thinking straight at that point. You're just paralyzed with fear. So the best thing to do is just to kind of take this leap of faith right now, let it go for a little bit, then see how you feel about it in like a day or two when the emotions have calmed down. And I can guarantee you that you'll be able to let it go, But the only thing is that because you went and did reassurance, it's probably going to get replaced with another thought if it hasn't already. So when it gets replaced with another thought, you have to make sure that you absolutely avoid reassurance, because ultimately it's the reassurance that keeps all of this going. So the more you pay attention to these thoughts, like with the reassurance, meaning like analyzing, which is self-reassurance, or asking people, which is reassurance from others, it doesn't matter, because when you do reassurance, your mind says the person is in danger because the person is trying to seek help. Like, not help for OCD, but they're trying to protect themselves, That's how your brain sees what you're doing when you do reassurance. And that is really what you're doing. You're trying to solve what you kind of worry about could possibly be a problem, but even you logically know that it's not an issue. But OCD kind of tries to, confuse you and say, well, what if it is? And it's not really OCD confusing you. It's your mind, because your mind doesn't understand what you're doing when you are solving a problem that doesn't exist. It starts to believe that it does exist because it doesn't understand OCD. So it's programmed to view what you are doing and bring you more of the same. So it sees you solving a problem, it's bringing you more of the problem. If you started to really care about another topic and really try to solve that topic, it would move on to that. But you have to actually genuinely care about it, right? Like, for example, people who are very conscious, very moral people will kind of have thoughts about hurting somebody as an OCD thought. But people who are more like finance oriented, like I've already said this in my other talks, so probably some of you have already heard this, but like finance oriented people would probably worry more about finances and things like that. Or it depends on personality, but whatever is the worst for you, like the worst possible outcome, that's what OCD is going to get you on. Because if it's not the worst, then you're not going to care about it as much, So the worst possible thing that could potentially happen in your life right now, So it's, it's going to come up with that. And it doesn't really say anything about you. It's just OCD, I mean, you guys, you kind of have to trust me on this, because I talk to so many people and I'm telling you, person after person after person, same stories. Well, not exactly the same, right? But there's same topics, and within those same topics, the worries that they have are very, very similar. So you guys have to trust me that this is all OCD, but you have to push through, because, if you're getting my help, or you have a doctor, whatever, or if you're doing it on your own, you can only help you. Other people are there to support you, hopefully. But if you're going to keep seeking reassurance, there's not a person in this world that will help you, because you have to stop seeking reassurance. Okay, so I hope this kind of clears it up a little bit. If you have more questions, or if something is not clear, or if I confused you more, please email me at info@youhaveocd.com and then I'll clarify it. Okay, let's get to the next question. So the next question I have has to do with what happens after you let go of the thought. So person is saying, how am I supposed to believe it was OCD? How can I let go, and what if something will happen that will come up like in the future, or what if I will get away with something? And these are all very common thoughts. This is what it's called, the back end of the spike, of the OCD spike, meaning that you feel the guilt of stopping to worry about this subject. And then when you feel the guilt, it's because your mind still thinks it's true. So even though you are very, very ready to let go of it, your mind is very much not ready to let go of it yet. So your mind is going to try to say, well, how can you let go of this? Well, what if it turns out to be true? Well, what if you're lying? What if this? What if that? And you just, it is all, if you're here asking me, it's probably saying, it's probably OCD saying this to me. Yes, it is OCD saying this to you, and you have to make sure you are disregarding these thoughts. So say, I am choosing to believe. So how should you, because you were asking me, how are you supposed to believe it was OCD, and how can you move on? You're doing it because you're choosing to do it. So instead of saying, I believe, I trust myself, that sometimes works, but if it's not working for you, you say that I choose to move on. I choose to let go of this thought. Because when you say the word choose, it's a decision. It's not based on trust. It's not based on anything. It's just that you chose to do something, and in this case, you are choosing to move on. Right? So you're choosing to move on. You're not solving it. You know it's OCD. But even if you don't, like even if you're not sure if it's OCD, you're still choosing to move on. And then if the situation turns out to be true later on, then you will choose to deal with it. If it doesn't turn out to be true, you're still letting it go. Do you know what I mean? And because when you do the choose thing, you're coming from a position of power. And that position is very good for overcoming OCD because you become stronger than your OCD. So, and this is what you were saying, that sometimes you get better, and the reason you get better is because you are doing the correct things, and then when it starts to kind of come back at you and ask you all these questions, well, what if you let go of the thought? Well, what's going to happen? Well, what if you're getting away with something? You should feel guilty, blah, blah, blah. It pulls you back in, so it's very important not to let it. Allow the thought to be there, allow it to give you all kinds of scary, crazy possibilities, and you still say, this is my OCD, I'm choosing to move on. And if you say, well, what if I don't know if it's my OCD? Then you say, well, I'm choosing to believe that it's OCD. So everything in this situation you're choosing. You're choosing to believe it's OCD. You're choosing to move on. You're choosing all of this. You're not looking for the truth. You're not analyzing. You're not asking people. You're choosing to believe, and you're moving on. So I hope this answered that. If not, just email me. You know where to find me. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Okay, so the next question, I was actually supposed to answer it in my last podcast, but that didn't work out last week. So I'm answering it. I answered it, but it didn't get recorded. Anyways. So I'm answering it now, and this is to do with the batteries, and you know who you are. You were asking me about car batteries. So you definitely should not, for everybody else, I'll just explain the situation kind of vaguely, that basically the person is, they go by an area that has a lot of batteries in it, and they're worried what if it gets on them, that kind of a thing. So this is contamination OCD, and this is a very common type of OCD. You should definitely not do anything to keep it going, such as changing your clothes, asking for reassurance, anything. If some battery acid gets on you, then you will know. Okay. I'm not sure if you're thinking that what would happen. I'm not familiar with what would happen. But either way, it's not a situation where you need to worry about it, because everybody else is walking by them, so you can walk by them. Do you know what I mean? OCD is going away from normal behavior into a compulsion, into an obsession. Do what everybody else is doing. Nobody's changing their clothes. Nobody's doing nothing. So you should try as much as possible to mimic normal behavior, because nobody's really normal. We were all, but mimic average behavior, because the more you mimic average behavior and you show your mind that this is not important to you, the more it's going to start to refocus and give you less anxiety on this particular topic, because you're actively saying to your mind over and over again that I'm not paying attention to this thought. This thought is not important. I'm letting go of it. I'm moving on as you're doing this. So every day when you walk by them, always view them as an exposure exercise. You're exposing yourself to the situation of the batteries being there, but you're choosing not to pay attention to them. So, and the same thing with the clothing, that you don't want to change. You don't want to do anything to make your mind think that you're scared. Even though for the first few times you will be scared, but it's like faking it until you make it, you know? So just fake it like you're not scared, to try to act as if you're not scared. Walk like everybody else is walking, and don't do anything that, you know, kind of sends that signal of fear. And you will see that after you do this a few times, it will take more than one time because you've already kind of made it a very big deal, right, to your mind. But after you do this a few times, you will see that your mind will slowly start to let go of it, and will get less anxious about it. So, and it's not an immediate process, but I promise you it will happen as long as you keep going, you know, and not seeking reassurance. So, and your family member is right not to give you reassurance, because that's a very good thing, because it's not good, you know, especially when people go to their family members to get reassurance. First of all, it always hurts the relationship with that person. And as you know, I talk to a lot of people, and it's, you know, and I have my own experiences as well. And, you know, it doesn't help. It doesn't help the situation, you know, because it's, you know, it's just better not to ask, because it doesn't benefit you. You get worse every time you get reassurance, and the other person doesn't understand and doesn't know how to help you, and they get scared and all this other stuff. And, you know, who knows how they will react. They're a different person than you, right? So they don't understand OCD. They can react in a number of ways. So it's just better not to do it. So I hope that explains it. Sorry again about last week. And if something is not clear, please let me know, and I'll explain in an email, or I can pick it up again in the next show. So the next question I have is a question about being a vegetarian, and the person starts to feel really guilty about not being a vegetarian, and it's becoming like an obsession. And you know, with OCD, it's not really about being, it can be about anything, you know, it can be about just like this, like being vegetarian, being non-vegetarian, you know, could be about relationships, could be about harm, could be about, cleaning, could be about anything, okay? It's just when you have a thought and you keep allowing yourself to get fixated on the what ifs, and feeling bad and all of this kind of stuff, and always putting your attention to this thought, you know? So you have to kind of think, what do you really want? You know, do you really want to be a vegetarian? Yes or no? So, and based on what you really want, that is how you should act, right? What OCD is telling you doesn't matter, you know? If you feel like you want to be a vegetarian, but right now you're having a hard time with it, you know, you have to do what's right for you, you know. It's kind of hard for me to talk about this subject because I am vegetarian myself. But, you know, ultimately this is not really about being a vegetarian. This is about getting over OCD and not creating an OCD situation, you know. Just as an aside, what you were saying, because you were saying you weren't eating enough, and being vegetarian has nothing to do with losing weight. I can tell you myself that when I switched from cooked foods, I also eat a lot of raw foods as well, but when I switched from eating meat to eating just being vegetarian, I have not lost weight. Not that I don't need to really lose weight, but I'm just saying that, like, you just have to eat more. If you're losing weight, that means you're not eating enough, you're not consuming enough calories. A calorie is a calorie. It doesn't matter if it's from, you know, an animal or from grain or from whatever. So just as an aside about, I'm into like the food and all of that kind of stuff, like nutrition and that. So, so if you're not eating, you really have to eat more. But when it comes to OCD dictating to you how you should be and what you should feel, you want to do what you want to do, you know, not what OCD wants you to do. Because the further you go down that road, the worse it will get. And I see that a lot of the times in the vegetarian community when they start to worry about, squishing every ant or every bug, or, some people start to worry about microbes. So it gets really out of hand if you let it. Just like any other OCD obsession can get really out of hand. I think being vegetarian is good, and that's just like my personal opinion, but I don't want you to get fixated on it and feel worse, because what OCD tells you shouldn't rule you, It's just a thought. Just like we were talking about other thoughts before, this is the same type of a thing, that it's not very different, it's just a thought. And, I would say just do really what you want to do, but don't do what OCD wants you to do, because that's just, so. But yeah, if you want to gain weight, you need to eat a lot. So, as they say, carb up, start eating carbs, you'll gain weight. I guarantee you. Like the potatoes, your grains, that's all good, but just eat raw foods as well with it. So, it does your body good, because cooked food is not really as good as nutritious as raw food. So, that's just an aside. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please let me know. Today's show was pre-recorded because I have an appointment with a client tomorrow morning, right at the time of the show, and I couldn't switch it. So it's only for this Wednesday. Next Wednesday I will be on time, I promise you. And thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys want to ask me a question, you can email me at info@youhaveocd.com. Also, if you would like me to answer the question on the show, which I would prefer, because I can talk about your situation for 10 minutes, but I can't write 10 minutes worth of emails, just because I have a lot of emails to answer as is. So please allow me to. I'm not going to reveal your identity or anything like that, or say anything that will kind of show who you are or anything like that. So if you guys would like to start a recovery program with me, you can find it at youhaveocd.com. Also, there's books there available. There is free information available. So please check that out. And thank you for your support. I'll see you next week.